What do these things want, and why are they here?
You still don't get it, do you, boy?
They have recruited the rich and the powerful.
They're running the whole show.
Wake up! They're all about you, all around you. Blinded us to the truth.
Take a look.
They are safe as long as they are not discovered.
I don't know what they are or where they came from, but we gotta stop them. Stay away from me. Put these on. They have us. Look at them. They're everywhere. Our owners.
We have no other choice.
I don't like this one bit.
Leave it alone, man. It ain't none of my business. Ain't none of yours.
We have been lulled into a trance.
Listen to what I'm saying to you.
We're in trouble. The whole world's in trouble. Control us.
You're sending some kind of signals out of TV sets.
I've got one that can see.
Mama don't like tattletale. Now we start spilling some blood. Let's go.
But
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Okay, welcome to Movie Night Extravaganza, episode 48. They Live, talking about John Carpenter, talking about our good old boy Ronnie Reagan, talking about Zizek and the trash can of ideology, and probably many other topics. I am here with a skeleton crew tonight. I
am the skeleton.
Protonic Reversal. You know him from that. You know him from Conan, Neutron, and the Secret Friends. Conan Neutron. And
yes,
I'm
indeed.
surprised you're not wearing sunglasses, by the way.
Gosh, that would have been a good move, huh? Wow. I actually have a pair that looks quite a bit like the pair that are in this film, but what can I say? Holidays got me slacking a little bit, but yeah, I love this movie. They Live's awesome. Big Carpenter fan, pretty much all around. But this is obviously salient and poignant in ways that some of the other ones aren't, and still holds up despite being like just kind of also pretty bizarre. So I'm very excited to talk about this one. Watched it again last night, and that's maybe the 20th time I've seen it. But
and we're also joined by JG Michael of Parallax Views, the great podcast. The three of us are going to be I don't know, is it next week? The 5th? My days are all fucked up.
If you don't know, I don't know. I think it's next week, isn't it? Because this is still December.
Yeah, it's next week. Yeah.
So next Wednesday, the three of us are going to be talking on This Is Revolution about Network, which should be a fun conversation. So this kind of feels like almost like a pregame for that.
Yeah, it's possibly my favorite movie of all time, and certainly in the top 3. So that should be exciting.
I remember JG made me promise a while back when we did JFK. He made me promise that if we did Network at any point, he would be on the panel. And at the time,
that was during the infancy of Movie Night Extravaganza. Now you're at almost 50 episodes.
I know it's crazy. We're gonna hit 50 episodes on New Year's Eve, which I mean, I don't know if that's exciting or if it's sad that I don't have plans for New Year's Eve and I'm going to be streaming on Twitch. But
well, look, during Omicron surge, like I would call it safe fun to be able to do that. But and also, that's an incredible achievement. That shouldn't be something we just blast past. I mean, that's some protonic reversal numbers. That's a lot of episodes for like 6 months. This show's been around.
This has been a podcast juggernaut, I think.
Yeah.
More than anything else I've really even worked on. I mean, I think it took like GTA like almost like a year to get to 50, or it took them a while. Mm-hmm. So I want to start with this. Usually I would start with John Carpenter talking about this movie, but this is like a 5-minute clip, and it's Roddy Piper and Keith David talking about filming the fight. And I guess originally they wanted to have like a 20-second fight. I was looking at the
awesome.
I'm sure JD knows about this.
I thought you. I wanted to say I thought you were about to say that you were going to show the clip of Roddy Piper talking about They Live on the Alex Jones show. But
oh well, yeah. I saw that. I didn't want to give play to that. But
let's not derail that immediately. Yeah, exactly.
This is a panel. It's a horror panel, I think, and it's Keith David and Roddy Piper are both on it talking about the process of. Well, Meg Foster's also on it, but apparently doesn't talk throughout this panel because I watched the entire thing and she didn't say one word. But this is talking about the fight, and I guess originally John Carpenter wanted to just kind of do like a standard like a movie fight where it's like like a minute or something. I think maybe even 20 seconds, and they just fight, and he puts on the glasses, and it's like, oh, cool. But then I guess they choreographed this, their like 10-minute long fucking fight. And actually ended up like beating the shit out of each other in the process of it, and like somewhat by accident, somewhat on purpose, I think. Just really going at it.
It's so good too. It goes from being ridiculous to unbearable to awesome, back to ridiculous, back to unbearable, back to being awesome at least 3 times. Like there's nothing like this in film. Like this would, if that was a short film, it would be like cited as like one of the best art films of all time. Just the fight, no context, just fighting over the glasses, right?
Well, and then my note that I wrote down is like it's literal class struggle. Like, you know what I mean? Like trying to get someone to be class conscious within the working class, and in the process of not wanting to give up on the American dream, quote unquote, not wanting to give up on their position within, the class structure, end up beating the shit out of them. Like,
rhetorically or physically,
Yeah. It's like the literal physical embodiment of class struggle. So I appreciate it on that level too.
Also was remade in South Park.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm gonna guess that they didn't fully get the context of They Live because
I don't think Matt and Trey would, but
it was the most fun I've ever had. I mean, I'm working with Roddy Piper, and pound for pound, the strongest man I've ever come across. I mean, he used to. There was a move. First of all, we rehearsed for 2 weeks, which was great. Jeff Amata was the coordinator, and he was wonderful. I mean, it's choreography. So our job is to sell it, to make it look like it was real. And who better to work with than him? I mean, that part was great. I'm just had to work up my chops and go, man, I want to be able to do it like him, But we, and I do remember the night right before, it was 3 days of filming, and we rehearsed for 2 weeks, up to the 3 days. And the night before we were to start that filming, E.T. came to film us. And we had always, up until then, except for maybe in the very beginning, when you're choreographing for fights on film, it's all about angles, because you can literally, I can be 10 feet away from somebody, and if the camera's behind me and you swing right and they react right, it looks like I hit him. So it's always about the distance. That was always being stressed. He never hit me, and I almost never hit him. except for that night, as soon as the camera rolled for E.T., the first move was I, punch him in the face, and where am I standing but too close? And I go bang, and I go, oh shit, I'm sorry. And he goes, oh, it's okay, let's start again. I was so embarrassed because I just finished telling the guy, no, he never hurt me. He's always been safe. Been a safe kid. He never got hurt. And boom. But I mean, it was some of the most fun I ever had because we really got to play. I mean, it was great stuff, man. We got to sell it, and I learned a few moves. So don't mess with me.
All right. I want to hear your side of this story.
Shoosh. Well, like Keith is a 220-pound dancer that hits like Mike Tyson doesn't even know it. He is extraordinary. An incredible guy. I guess maybe from dancing, and you got to be really strong to do that. He's a really, really strong guy. Really strong. And he hits really, really hard. And thinks he's pulling them. Yeah. Glad you never met Hogan. Because to remember everything, I've been doing it for so long, to remember everything like he did, extraordinary. I think one of the things that helped the fight out was, instead of shooting a fight in the traditional sense where they do a couple things and break it down and do a couple breakdown, John let us kind of, okay, we're starting. And we went as far as we could. And that gets an energy. And when Keith's hitting me in the tummy, I said, it's okay. It's the fat stupid. Go ahead, and it's okay, Keith. And he's such a pro. I don't know of any other actor, especially, I was really difficult to handle back then. So I hear, and to hang in there, because I've been fighting like Andre the Giant, Victor the Bear, 650-pound fucking bear named Victor, like he needed a name. I am a bear, I'm Victor. No, I'll remember you. So by the time I got to Keith, I was kind of a tough piece of meat. And I don't blame you. I get tired too. But you did really well, and just go ahead. Yeah, good. Just good. What an asshole. No, you wouldn't believe. The guy liked to fucking kill me. So many fucking punches, and the punches up. Yeah, you missed this way, but catch me in the eye coming back with a thumb. Like, fuck, man, let's just go as far as we can. Fucking like 3 rolls into it, Now everything's hurting on me, and he's happy, Pants wagging, I'm beating the shit out of Roddy Piper. Yeah, you are. I just put the glasses on,
That's awesome.
He's oh, you put the glasses on.
I put on hey, I heard about this fight. Do you think I want to get involved in this? I do not.
But you could tell, I love how you could tell, number one, they had a lot of fun doing it. But I also like that you can see the wrestler like hamming it up coming out in the middle of his explanation, because he starts off just explaining it, and as the crowd starts to build, he's like, by the end of it, he's like, oh, I'm having fun, you know what I mean? You could tell it, you could see his ramping up that I feel like only really comes out of that wrestling world, where once you see that the crowd is on your side, you're willing to fully build up your your story.
100%. And I like the fact that they knew how over the top it was, and they kind of leaned into it, right? I think it makes it makes that scene, even for people that like maybe don't get the movie or don't care for it as like a film, they like more social commentary. It's impossible to ignore that there is again, like I talked about earlier, basically a short film of dudes fighting over whether somebody will or will not put on the glasses.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like it goes on for so long. And every time I see it, I'm like, yeah, that was a long. I was like, oh, there's more. Jesus, they're still fighting over this, huh? It's amazing. There's nothing like that.
I love when they get into the part of it where he's like just hitting his head off the car, and then and then he has the bottle and he breaks the bottle and fucking he breaks the bottle though too much, you know what I mean? Like goes to crack it, and then Roddy Piper just starts laughing at him for like breaking the bottle too much because obviously you can't use it as a weapon now.
And then Keith David's about to step on the glasses and he's like, no, and he like basically gets kneed in the face for the efforts. I mean, like we could do a whole podcast just about that fight scene. I feel like we are so far, but anyway, what do you think, JJ Michael?
I mean, the fight scene's classic. I don't know what else to add to it though, because like I said, it's so iconic. You know, I mean, when you've had a fight from They Live recreated in who are the two characters, Timmy and the other kid in South Park. I keep coming back to that, but I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, it's become a pop cultural sort of.
Oh, isn't it Timmy and the kid with the crutches? That's the
yes, yeah. That's the one where they recreate the whole. Yeah, but I mean that goes for the whole movie too. I mean, the movie is referenced everywhere now. So I mean, who was that artist? Shepard Fairey does the Obey art or whatever, right?
Yeah. That's where his whole brand came from. It started off with Andre the Giant has a posse, and kind of went from there. But yeah, Obey Giant.
By the way, if barking starts in the background, I mean she's good right now, but apparently Audrey's figured out how to open doors. She's opened the door to the basement twice already during this podcast. But
canine collaborator.
So building on this conversation though, I mean the political implications of this movie, I do think it's funny that during this whole COVID thing especially, it's been kind of parroted by right-wing hacks. And I mean, like Alex Jones is a perfect example of it. Like
it's Q people. Let's call it what it is. It's the Q people. That's the.
But by the way, the only reason I mentioned the Alex Jones thing was because Roddy Piper was messing with him the whole interview, like saying, "Yeah, wrestling is real. It's like a shoot fight when I wrestle," which I just find to be the most hilarious thing ever. He's just working this, jerk. So
it's I like him a lot, and when I think of Roddy Piper, the first thing I think about is when he's the maniac on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
When he just ends up following them back to the bar and not leaving. He's like, "Listen, I need a place to stay," and
right.
And that's, I guess, all of that is almost entirely improv.
And it's big, like the wrestler vibes, like the movie, like in that way. But in a way, it's played for comedy, as It's Always Sunny does so well. But I think that again, a lot of the QAnon idiots like hitched on this, thinking that like, oh, did you see that documentary They Live? But they hitched on the most facile elements, ignored the class part of it, and really only got down with the sort of reptilian shapeshifters,
right.
Most maniac parts of the ethos.
It starts with like David Icke and his craziness, and then the QAnon people pick it up, and here we are. And a lot of the right really have appropriated the image of what's the character's name? John Nada. John Nada, which is such a perfect name.
It's a pretty tough
nothingness,
name.
He's
exactly.
There, the drifter. I mean, I could see. I guess I don't know. Why do you think the right has picked up on this movie?
But here's the thing: it's not anything subtle. It's just because there's something that's keeping us specifically down, and we can't see it. But like, if you're into like our thing, then you can see it. It's as simple as that. Like, there's no nuance to it at all. The thing is, they're actively ignoring the class part of it. They're actively ignoring the actual message. It spends like 40 minutes talking about before like the action even gets going. That all is just that's access list dropped. because it doesn't fit the narrative. What they see is like, oh, there's people controlling things. In this case, like whatever, globalists, right? That's what they're all
and there's the working class white man that has to stop them. I think they
right,
on that maybe.
And they see that not ascribed to any kind of like class unification theory, but they see themselves.
Yeah, they don't see the Keith David character and him teaming up. Yeah,
no, that doesn't matter. That's again, access list dropped. Right. But they see, but the thing is, these guys who are, you know, like whatever, I could lose a few pounds myself, but these guys are like 50, 60 pounds overweight, will charitably say, wearing like, you know, flip-flops into Applebee's and whatnot. And they think they're Rowdy Roddy Piper. They are not Rowdy Roddy Piper, to be explicitly freaking clear in any way, shape, or form. But that's who they see. They see themselves in that, but they are missing any of the nuance that, like a child. Because let's be clear, that QAnon conspiracy bullshit, it's all very childlike. Like it's almost like a willful disassociation from reality because it's too much to understand that the world has moved on without you. Like they can't process that. So they can't process that. They bought into this fantasy, which on the face of it is completely does not hold up to the barest iota of scrutiny. I mean, but it makes them feel good. This is hold on. I'm not going to let you talk over the endpoint. It makes them feel good. That's why. Go ahead.
I was going to say they even have to ignore the fact that, I mean, you know, there's the Episcopalian Church in it that's a front to the revolutionary group. It's a black revolutionary group. Cy Richardson is credited as the black revolutionary in the movie. And I mean, Raymond St. Jacques' character, actually, the preacher, talks about racial injustice and these things.
Well, because, I mean, they're
it's intersectional class solidarity.
Which is what class solidarity has to be, right? Like it's not like classes stop when it comes to the racial line. Like it's the same, you know, it's the same classes, like you know, it's the same class system no matter what race you are, or wherever you fall on, you know, any kind of spectrum. The reason that I'm bringing this up though is because I think that during the, you know, coronavirus specifically, and I definitely want to get you guys' thoughts on this, but whenever I log into Facebook, like half the people I see on there are doing like COVID doesn't exist conspiracy.
Plandemic, brother. It's a pandemic.
Yeah. But like when you look into why they feel like it doesn't exist or what they think the end goal of it existing is, it's just the obey part of it, right? With no critique of capital, no critique of why certain parts of capital would want to push certain elements of the pandemic, I guess. Like there's no, it just goes as far as the government wants to control you. The government wants to control you because just let me flesh this out. The government wants to control you because they crave power. And when they control you, they get off on it or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no critique of capital. It's the fact that the government itself wants to control you for the sake of controlling you. Whatever there's no plan beyond that. They just want the population controlled and mellow, which is kind of half of what this movie is saying. But then the other half is, why do they want everybody, you know, it's because they want to extract resources. It's because they want to use this as basically their third world. You know what I mean? Like they explicitly say that in this, which the same way that we use Central America, the same way that we use Africa, the same way that we use, you know, the poorer parts of Asia that aren't, I guess, the reason that we're so upset about China, you know, being the second superpower is that parts of Asia that would be in our orbit and parts of Africa that would be in our orbit, you know, that we could do full-on resource extraction comes within the economic purview of a different superpower at that point. So it's really interesting that, you know, there's no like grabbing onto this movie. The obey part, I think, is kept. Like the government.
Yeah, but that's it. But none of the nuance.
But without the critique of capital, without the critique of Reaganism, that's clearly there throughout the entire fucking movie. That's the point. You know what I mean? Like without all these things where, and I have a clip to play after this conversation where John Carpenter is kind of, I mean, it's funny that John Carpenter is kind of just like I mean, he's the good kind of lib, but he is like, he's like a left lib. Like he's a FDR liberal. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's outraged.
He may be an FDR liberal, but I think he may have sympathies for. I mean, he has at least like 2 different movies where revolutionaries are depicted. As
I don't.
He's sufficiently radicalized in his way.
I'm not. The reason that I'm saying that is because I have a clip where he's talking about how he was pissed off that the welfare state, He like, you know what I mean? Like the gains that we made under the New Deal were just completely decimated by Reagan, and he was upset that, you know, and he talks about Carter in this, you know, kind of giving us the hint that which I you know, this is not where my politics are, but it is something that I'm sympathetic towards this kind of liberal, where it's like, you know, you're upset about, you know, Reagan draining the welfare state of all its potency, upset about all of these programs that are going to help, you know, poor people actually get empowered, actually kind of create a life that has dignity and where they can actually, you know, be upwardly mobile. He's upset that all of this stuff is drained by Reaganism and wanted to make a movie about it. And that's basically his thesis that he puts out there. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that in order to, you have to ignore all of those parts if you're on the right. And
so there's two major points. So why don't I let JG Michael kind of chime in before we watch that?
No, I just wanted to say real quickly. I think this happens with a number of genre films. The movie that immediately comes to mind when I hear movies that get misinterpreted or reinterpreted by the right, I think of this movie, and I also think of Joel Schumacher's Falling Down, because people explicitly or just they completely ignore that in Falling Down, the Michael Douglas character is going home to family annihilate. That's pretty heavily implied in the movie. And, you know, you're not supposed to think, oh, Michael Douglas is the hero. But a lot of people I know, especially suburbanites that watch that, are like, I like him. You know, he doesn't get the hamburger the way it looks on the screen at the McDonald's. He's justified. Society pushed him over the edge. When really Schumacher was saying, no, this dude's a jerk.
He's a dick. He's this guy is the problem. Yes, exactly.
But it's interesting because there's quite a few movies I think like that get reinterpreted or misinterpreted by the right. Yeah.
Well, they look at like a character that's a clear anti-hero, clearly a cautionary tale, and they look at like, here's a way to be. Like, no, that is not a way to be. That is not like a role model for you to emulate. Well, this is meant to be a cautionary tale.
That's the interesting thing.
It's allegory.
That's the interesting thing about the Roddy Piper character too, right? Because I mean, Piper's character, John Nada, isn't like a violent man. He's sort of a pacifist, and he only goes into violence when he feels it's absolutely necessary.
And the only people that he kills are the aliens. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't.
That's true.
He goes out of his way. He bends over backwards not to kill any human beings.
Yep.
Like in any way. Like even the two cops who they said some of the cops are just humans that have linked up with the aliens, and some of them are the two cops that he kills are the alien ones. Like they're like, hey, we got to talk about this. You know, which is the classic cop line, right? Like where they're like, listen, buddy, like, why don't we just have a conversation about this somewhere else? And then you put down the gun and they fucking, you know, kill you in the car. But he's
not Keith David. He wouldn't do that. No.
By the way, there's so I guess They Live was at number 1, like in the entire country for movies at the box office for 2
weeks. It came out. I don't know if you guys knew this now. Maybe you did, but I believe it came out 8 days before the election. They elected H.W. Bush president.
That's true. Yes.
I didn't know that, but that timeline definitely makes sense.
Michael Dukakis, they still talked about him in the tank, and like that's why he lost as big as he did. You know, like that and Willie Horton, which again was just like standard issue race baiting by what's his name?
Well, I mean, the Bushes have an extremely long race baiting history, and that's kind of the one of the.
I believe that was Atwater, if I remember correctly. It's been a while, but I believe that was an Atwater joint. Willie Horton.
Wasn't it also? I can't remember if it was. I can't remember if it was Mondale or if it was or if it was Dukakis, but wasn't there also like an anti death penalty stance? And then the thing was like, oh well, what would happen if, you know, your wife was raped by somebody?
That was Willie Horton. That was I'm old enough that I remember it. I didn't understand any of the context for it, but I'm old enough that I do remember that, like where I was like whatever 9. Or 10,
well, because the Willie Horton thing was specifically that, you know, he wanted to. Well, there were some people that were criminals that were getting kind of like weekend passes, which I think is something that if you're really going to rebuild people's really if you really do want to reintegrate people in prison to society, it's something that's necessary, right? Like going into society at some point is a necessary part of that process. But yeah, those two things were kind of tied together. I don't know.
But the idea was the carceral state versus any kind of rehabilitation or anything.
Yeah.
Like, the idea was, well, these liberals, these elitist northeastern liberals are doing this. Do you really want them running the country? I'm trying to sort of frantically look this up to see if that was the case. It was definitely Dukakis in '88, but I'm trying to remember what I want to say it was Lee Atwater who did that. It might have been a young Carl Rove even at that point, but I'm pretty sure it was Lee Atwater and his team that did that, and it was devastatingly effective because much people focus on Dukakis and the tank. It wasn't Dukakis and the tank that made him look foolish. Like, by the way, I do that actually served. We'll start, but like I think that hit upon a certain amount of just racial panic that was happening around that time too, as well as like especially in areas where there was that big pushback that eventually led to Giuliani like coming to power in New York, things along those lines. That like there was basically all this idea of, hey, what if we get them working on the other rather than like realizing they have more in common amongst themselves than with us. And that's so key to understanding what Carpenter, I think, was trying to do here. I mean, it's not like he was subtle about it, right? Like, it was pretty explicit.
This is where I get to mention the one of my favorite little notes of trivia about this movie, and I mentioned it to Conan earlier before we came on. But everyone thinks that the aliens are called aliens in the script or the credits, the reptilians, whatever. They're actually referred to, I believe, in the script, and I know they're referred to this in the credits as ghouls. And I thought of that because you said Rudy Giuliani.
Exactly.
I think that's apropos that they're described by Carpenter as the ghouls.
Ghouls, yeah.
Well, I can't remember if it was Invasion of the Body Snatchers or if it was like a different older sci-fi movie. But weren't there multiple sci-fi movies like in the 50s, which this movie is based on Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Like that's where John Carpenter kind of got his not the 70s one, but the 50s one. That's like one of the major places that John Carpenter, which is a lot of sci-fi movies, I think, were inspired by the 50s version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But I was watching him talk in an interview about how he was really, really into monster movies and like all of these all of these movies that are like that movie, but he was really inspired for this by Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So, ghouls was like a common term for monsters, I think, in that era.
Well, ghouls can also have a different connotation politically.
Yeah. No, I know. And I use it all the fucking time politically to talk about like the worst elements of the Republican Party, like fascists and like the neocons and the fucking like the military state.
AKA all them suckers.
And AKA spooks is another like, another one of those like terms for somebody who's worked out of the deep state for like H.W. Bush. Like, you know what I mean? Like the actual like embodiment of the post Nixon CIA.
So I wanted to I actually wanted to ask your opinion on something before you go to the next clip. One of the things that really struck me when I rewatched this is that whole opening intro. So, I mean, we could get into it after the clip, but I thought it was interesting. First, there's a lot of imagery that reminds me of old Westerns throughout this movie, but that opening in particular, when John Nada is just coming in to LA, basically, I believe it takes place in LA. When he's first coming there and you see him going through Skid Row and you have that bluesy sort of music playing,
which plays throughout the whole movie.
It's but it's a really powerful opening for me because I feel like Carpenter's portraying a sort of dystopian side to the dream of California, the California dream, LA, Hollywood. He's showing a more dystopian side to it, and I think that's a really powerful image to start the film off with. I don't know what you guys think of that though.
Yeah, I agree. And then it's interesting that one of the first things you hear is the woman on the PA system that's like, oh, due to a computer error, which the computer part of it comes in later on. And she's like, due to a computer error, we no longer give out food stamps. Which kind of immediately jars you into kind of this is a political satire. This is a political movie with implications that have to do with the real world at this time period that aren't just, it's not just sci-fi. You good, Conan? Are you tripping out on discovering the truth?
I'm playing the bass line.
Yeah, no, yeah, and that plays throughout the entire thing.
It's such a stereotypical blues riff, but it's like, what's the blues? Hey, I'm down on my luck. You know, the man won't let me. Blah blah blah. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant in simplicity.
You know what I heard about the blues? You know, I heard that if you're from Long Island, you know, there ain't no blues man from Long Island.
I was gonna say it's arguably depicts the blues better than Crossroads. Yeah. Anyway, maybe that gag worked, maybe it didn't. But it was actually it was pointed out to me by Lindsay when we watched this. It was like she's like I think I even can play that bass line. I'm like, yeah, you probably could. Go ahead. I wasn't meaning to distract. I was just trying to.
A big part of one of the reasons that I find John Carpenter one of the most inspiring directors, as somebody that wants to be like a filmmaker.
Those glasses have quite the effect. Go ahead.
As someone who spent their life like wanting to be a filmmaker, one of the most inspiring things about John Carpenter is that he's able to keep like costs down on all of these movies by, number one, just being an amazing person to come up with a score, right? Like he can come up with a score that lasts for the entire movie. He's great at that. Like that's his you know thing that he can't like.
And he always attributes it to just smoking weed too. He's humble about it. So I came up with that synth when I was high.
Well, sure, and and he's very opaque about that. I do want to use this opportunity as my platform as the resident musician on the show to say that the active use of drugs does not create creativity. It only allows people to better communicate with it. And I think that
it enhances the natural creativity that somebody like John Carpenter would have.
It removes the distractions, and I think it's often used as a substitute for creativity, and it's often attributed to narcotics and illicit substance, and it's not true. And I would like to see more of that in filmmaking. That said, he smokes a lot of weed and he plays a lot of video games, and we all know that, and we love him for it. And he's also a great musician. Like we've talked about this on like what was it, Big Trouble in Little China or like Halloween. Like Tony, who's coming on for Predator, went and saw him play. And it was great. He was like, it was fucking awesome. It wasn't just good. It was fucking awesome. Like he's really good. Like the songs work.
We had a 30-minute conversation about this, and I remember this because I had to
Big Trouble
on the Murder Night wrap up. We talked about this for like 45 minutes, and I had to cut most of it out because I was like, that's 1/5 of our entire show. But this is the political side.
But anyway, The point of fact is that I think that soundtrack is perfect. Like I think that soundtrack's perfect for trying to embody, especially the first sort of third of the movie, the down on your luck, like, you know, hey, where am I gonna go in this unfeeling world? Kind of. It's perfect. It's awesome. I mean, he's so good at it. It's one of the reasons why like he's respected as a musician as well as a filmmaker. You know, it's great.
And it's funny that there's so much in this movie that the score is what he gets asked about the least, I think, because I've watched multiple interviews with him and people don't even like, and I'm like watching it. And after our conversations about John Carpenter, like I definitely thought about like, hey, this score like that repeats for pretty much the entire movie. It's good as fuck. But every interview, they're like, oh, well, do you want to talk about the political implications of it and filming it, like the process of kind of, I guess it was one guy that played every single one of the aliens once he put the glasses on. So the same stuntman played all of the aliens, which is just like a fascinating tidbit. And watching it again.
Did he get paid the same? Did he get paid for one role, or did he get paid for like 40?
Well, when he played women, they paid him a little less. And,
that's funny because it's true. Anyway, you got a clip to play, right?
Yeah.
Movie I made towards the end of the 80s, and I was reflecting on a lot of the values that I saw around me at the time, mainly inspired by Ronald Reagan's conservative revolution. There was a great deal of obsession with greed and making a lot of money, and some of the values that I grew up with had been pushed aside. So I decided to scream out in the middle of the night and make a statement about that. And They Live is partially a political statement. It's partially a tract on the world that we live in today. And as a matter of fact, right now, it's even more true than it was then. We are manipulated by a lot of media around us. We are consumed by consumerism. And as you can see, the recent events in this country, they are still among us. They do live, indeed. The 80s never ended. The Reagan Revolution never ended. Although there is now a pull towards the left. I admit that. The right is, in this country, the right is confused and lost. But they may win. They may win, and what they want to do is beyond Reagan. They've moved so far to the right. And it's really unrestrained capitalism that I'm criticizing. I'm a capitalist. I love capitalism. I love making money. But unrestrained capitalism leads to depressions. It leads to the recession that we had. So the 80s never ended. They're still here. They're still on Earth exploiting us.
We just need the glasses.
No, we do. It's more than ever.
Do you think the film has still some relevant social commentary?
Oh, that's never ended. That's still with us. They Live is a documentary about what's going on now. Relevance, of course. Yeah, it's still here. Here's my philosophy on it. I'll just tell you. I think Ronald Reagan, along with your gal there, Iron Lady Thatcher, came into power by saying government was a problem. That's an absolute lie. Good government is a solution. Bad government is a problem. Not government. That's all it is.
Everything we think about buying cars and having pools and condos and all the things that everybody strives for in America basically are created by this race of inhuman creatures that really just want to exploit us like a third world. And it's told from the point of view of the homeless. So it has a kind of a theme and a message to it, but basically it's an action film.
Fair enough. Also, I think that the whole good government thing, it makes me wonder, was he like a Warren dude?
Well,
I'm serious. I mean, I could see him going Sanders, I could see him going Warren. I could see him being like, no, it's Andrew Yang or something. Like,
well, here's the thing. No, I think
here's the thing, people.
I'm John Carpenter. Here's the thing.
You gotta put on these glasses or you're gonna eat that trash can. Elizabeth Warren in They Live.
Holy shit. Imagine that whole fight scene with fucking Elizabeth Warren just fucking.
Oh God.
Put on the glasses. Just put them on. You can see the government. You can see everything is about regulation.
No, I'm not putting on the glasses. I'm not going to do it. Here's your week's pay. I got that for you. Now get out of my face.
I think he'd be a Bernie guy. One thing that I think is really interesting that I noticed watching it a second time, and I only noticed this because I've listened to so much fucking folk music lately, like Pete Seeger and stuff. But he uses the phrase, he's like, my father taught me all about the power and the glory, which is, the famous folk song about, how America could be, like kind of if like the New Deal and if the working class was empowered, like the power and the glory is that song. And I feel like throughout this is kind of littered with references to like, welfare programs, the expansion of the welfare state, which makes it kind of funny that it's, like the glasses get put on and the central message of the film really is about, empowering like a social democracy, although, that word is never used, and like empowering like the welfare state rather than kind of just being like, listen, government is bullshit, which is the way that, the right takes it.
I was gonna say that that line where Piper is in the room with Keith David after they fought, and you referenced the line he has there about, he says, "My daddy took me down to the river, told me about the power and the glory, kicked my ass, and saved me." I think is what he says after that. Then he goes on to talk about how his dad changed, and became like mean and sort of cruel and coarse, and how he ran away. It really ties into like the broader sort of message about the death of certain values. And, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. I thought that was a good little like mini monologue from him in the movie that gets overlooked a lot.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I think that when I talk about like the power and the glory, like that part of it, it's kind of the death of these Rooseveltian values, right? Like the working class needs to be uplifted. Kind of like I've been listening to the Matt Christman Hell of Presidents. So it was interesting watching this movie and listening to that kind of simultaneously. But they talk about how, you know, when Roosevelt ran for president, one of the signs that people had seen was like, you know, the president knows that your boss is a son of a bitch, was like one of the pro Roosevelt signs. And it's kind of this you know, this back away from a class consciousness that kind of brings you into the fold and makes you realize that as a working person, you're connected in solidarity with all of these other working people. You know what I mean? Like, and I think Keith David perfectly represents that. And I think the struggle that, you know, Keith David has, where he's like, I just want to keep my head down. I finally have a job. Like I've been struggling. I finally want to keep my head down, and just, you know, and just work and not bother anybody. And, you know, the whole fight scene erupts and it's over, kind of learning the truth and being enlightened on the fact that, you know, when you do keep your head down, and this comment is made throughout the entire film, when they're talking about, you know, this individual need to just take care of yourself and fuck everybody over. And, you know, all of a sudden,
even I was just going to add, even in a way at the beginning, Piper almost believes in a version of that. It's a little bit less cruel, but he says, you know, oh, I believe in America. I believe in the American dream, to Keith David. And a lot of the movie is really him coming to realize, oh, I've been fed a pack of lies.
Yeah. And, but then also at the same time, like, and I have another one on more specifically, I think, Carpenter's politics, but I think Carpenter also believes in the American dream in a different way, right? Like, he believes the American dream that came before Reaganism, that wasn't just, you know, we're going to profit. And I was thinking about this today, rewatching it, but, you know, when they're like, oh, per capita, everybody that's gotten involved with us, you know, your incomes have all rose by like an average of 39%. And there's a Thanos meme that I saw where, you know, it's after he does the snap, and they're like, you killed off half of humanity. And he's like, it was worth it for, and they crossed out, and it's like 2.3% GDP growth in like, per capita. Like,
I saw that one. That was solid. Yeah.
But like, it reminds me of that, right? Like because you have to think about it in terms of, you know, what were people making per capita even, like if the Drifter turns into, and I know you wanted to talk about the actor that played the Drifter, but like, he kind of comes in and he's wearing a suit, and it's like, what is 39%, you know, like 39% income growth really for that guy? Like, it's probably not that much money. He's probably sold out his entire species for, you know, barely anything. And the profits,
absolutely.
like that upward mobility. But like the thing is that, you know, the Reagan era kind of killed off, or was the death of kind of that sense of upward mobility. Like, the sense that, you know, like the amount of people that were going to just have it better than than their parents, or the amount of people that were just going to have it better than the generation before them, just gets cut. And it leads to people being cutthroat, thinking about themselves, this sense of individualism as like, the government has failed us, everything has failed us, the only thing that you can really do is try to profit as much as possible. So
found this while we were talking, by the way.
Well, I'm you know, I'm happy he kills it on Twitter.
His Twitter's really good.
Yeah. But
you know, real quick, if I could, what struck me was the sort of, I call it the police state scene, because I saw that on the big screen when they re-showed it at one of the theaters around here when I was in my teens, and there's the scene where the police just come in and wreck the whole little shanty town, and the church, where the resistance group is
it's rough. That's a scene that like when I watched it like last night, I was like, wow, this is like way more like brutal than I remember. Like, it's harsh.
It's rough, and not only that, but it's still relevant, because, you know, I was just
absolutely
talking,
relevant.
I was talking to some friends in San Francisco about they just passed on Christmas Eve. They passed an emergency police swarm bill, which is not going to benefit the homeless and the poor
in San Francisco.
So we still see a lot of this stuff over and over again. The stuff that he's talking about in this movie.
Well, when you think
I
about,
mean, like, I'm from Oakland, and like Libby Schaff there's been no greater friend to development than Libby Schaff, you know. And Gene Kwan was a hapless fucking fool who bungled everything. But like, look at the response to Occupy, you know, like it was sort of like everything about it is just perfectly indicative of the last 20 years of that. Just like, hey, we don't want these people stirring up trouble, so raise the Shire, right? And like, I think that's I don't know, that's
I mean, it's prescient in a similar way that, you know,
it hits differently now, but it was like it was brutal then, but it's even more like, yeah, this is basically what they're gonna do. Okay.
No, but it's prescient in the same way that RoboCop is too. Like, you know, the idea that like all of these systems are going to be privatized. In this sense, I think John Carpenter has an incredibly attuned. I mean, I assumably he kind of probably read a lot of New Left stuff and about, you know, like the relationship between labor and capital. But when it comes to law enforcement, like the skeleton function of law enforcement is to protect capital. And in this movie, the function of law enforcement is literally to protect capital. Like they only show up in order to protect this alien race. And a lot of them either have been bought off or they are of this alien race where they're willing to kind of just swarm in and destroy any kind of resistance to their movement. So it's interesting. And it's really fascinating to hear John Carpenter as like one of the first mainstream directors I've ever heard talk about Reagan's entry into the system as a conservative revolution. Like it doesn't get talked about enough. And I think that, I mean, I almost felt like he was embodying the spirit of Pascal when he was doing that. But like the 50-year, because it's the thing that's so insidious, I think, about the Reagan turn, like the neoliberal turn, that not enough people comment on is the fact that the 60s, you know, revolutionary spirit, I think, was in the air. People were like, oh, the revolution is coming. The revolution did come. It just wasn't the form of a neoliberal turn. You know what I mean? Like it was a top down, fuck over the working class, fuck over the poor revolution. But there was a revolution.
The other thing that's important about that is I don't think people realize that there's a really good Showtime series that Matt Turnauer, who's the executor of the estate of Gore Vidal. But he just did a movie, a series on Showtime called The Reagans. And, you know, I've interviewed him, and that series is really good because
that series is really good.
People think that Reagan just came in the 80s. No, this was part of a long-term sort of the conservatives in America were playing the long game.
Nobody in California thinks that, by the way. I was way too young and or not born yet, but like Reagan was a well-known commodity. Reagan and a known conservative inheritor of the Barry Goldwater.
Yeah, I mean, he was even cozying up to the John Birchers at one point in his early political career. Yeah.
Have you guys read the books by Rick Perlstein? Like, you know, Nixon Land, Reagan Land,
Nomad Land?
Yes. No, Rick Perlstein has written these 4 books that I enjoyed a lot, but they just track from kind of this Taftite, and I've asked him about it before on Twitter and he's answered, but there's like kind of Robert Taft was kind of the conservative, the conservative, I guess, face of things, and it was kind of a weak group within the Republican Party, which at the time, you know, most of the Republicans or a lot of the Republicans were kind of liberal Republicans. And, you know, Robert Taft was leading kind of this conservative movement that didn't go anywhere. And then, of course, it did with Barry Goldwater. And then, you know, I was just so Rick Perlstein has these 4 books. They're huge books, but they trace the same people that had, you know, built up Barry Goldwater, who had built up Nixon in some ways, you know, understanding that Nixon kind of was willing to dip his full dirty ass foot into the waters of this conservative movement, and then kind of trailing it through the Ford Reagan race in 1976, which is, you know, a book called The Invisible Bridge, kind of tracks that. And then Reagan Land, his last book, you know, Reagan's rise to full power as president. You know what I mean? Like that book tracks that, and it ends with Reagan winning. But, you know, those are really good books if you haven't read them.
I was going to say, I mean, the other interesting thing about it is a lot of the leaders of that conservative movement that brought us Reagan, they'll openly tell you that this was a long-term plan that they had built, even going back to the 50s. You know, Richard Vigory is the one I like to mention. He has a book called Takeover, the 100-Year War for the Soul of the GOP and how conservatives can win it.
He still does. He talks to like business groups, and he does these he does these like these motivational talks where he's like, listen, this is how you can use that the mail system that we created for Goldwater, like first Goldwater and then Nixon and then Reagan, kind of throughout that whole process. He's like, you can use this this mail-in service because the thing about Richard Vigory is he was sitting actually in like a he went into the Republican headquarters and was just copying down names of people so that he could do his mailers. You know what I mean? Like, and he ended up copying down like 500 names before they kicked him out and realized like, oh shit, this guy is just literally like copying down our mailing list. So he actually gives like these, because he's still alive, and he gives these talks to you know, all these business groups where he's like, this is how you can use my system that I've created. Probably gets paid a shitload of money for it too, for your business.
Well, yeah, he's open about it and he's proud of it. And there's other figures too, like Paul Weyrich and others who they openly say this. It's not a secret, you know.
Yeah. I mean, starting out with kind of the McCarthyite part of it too, and some of the same figures that were kind of speech writing for McCarthy end up being the people that were, you know, fully in charge of Reagan's campaign, which is, you know, insane. And also, you know, the young conservatives who kind of sparred with the New Left throughout the entire 60s and 70s as like the youth, because you have to have a youth movement, right? Like you have to have some kind of youth force behind you, which it's funny that really the conservatives don't seem to now. It seems like Turning Point USA, which generates some of the funniest, you know, memes making fun of their memes, but like it seems like that's the closest thing they really have now. And I don't know, it just seems like both.
Yeah, okay, but and this I'm finding this subject is kind of I feel like the air is being let out of the tires of the discussion, frankly, personally. But like, I think it's important to remember that going back to the idea of the Reagan Revolution and everything, and which has never ended, frankly, being like a multi-decade project. That's what I get so frustrated with people that, you know, oh, we didn't win, so okay, electoralism is bad, and we shouldn't do that anymore. That's fucking absurd. That's a child's understanding of things, and all it takes is looking at things from a historical perspective rather than an ideological one. To learn from what's come before, that like look, if the point is you're meant to feel frustrated, the point is you're meant to feel like nothing is happening. That's the point, because if you dissuade people long enough, then they'll concern themselves with other things and they'll stop getting involved in it. But if it's something you actually believe in, and if it's something that you actually want to see change in, then you have to stay with it, and you have to stay with it in a way that works. And I'm not saying electoralism is the answer for everything, don't get it twisted, but like you know, I actually probably have a laundry list of problems that's more pointed to the American left than I do for like any other.
Oh no, we're watching Conan get blackpilled live on Twitter.
but that's just because it's like you know it's like you're so close to getting it right, but it's like you're falling for all of the nonsense that you shouldn't be falling for. I mean, honestly, it's probably like, you know, your mod libs, beltway brain people that I have like the most vehement detesting of everything that they stand for. But like it's look, man, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like that's what it comes down to. And the people that ran took part of the you know, whether the Christian conservative folks, the Reagan Revolution people, they realized that. All the Goldwater people, yeah, Goldwater lost, right? Goldwater got hammered and eventually even like recanted some of the more gross parts of the orthodoxy, but ultimately Goldwater
he also fully leaned into the segregationist part, which I think
of course he did. That's an important part of like that coalition, right?
He and good old Bill Buckley.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The lionized Bill Buckley, aka the you know, what did he say to Gore Vidal? Like, you know, with the many times he physically threatened him. But anyway, point of fact is that like you got to be patient for that kind of thing. And Carpenter's right. In many interviews with this movie, he talks about how like, hey, Reagan Revolution never stopped. Like it's still going on. Like there's like been different people that have been at, you know, benefiting from it, or like, you know, nicer people administrating it, but it really never changed. And he's totally right about that. And he is, which is weird because, again, it requires that you have a nuanced view of politics. Yeah, he is basically like a regulatory capitalist, but he has progressive ideology. And that is possible. And the problem I have with so much of the modern left is that no one's willing to make coalitions. It's like you either correct or incorrect. I'm like, well, you can be correct all you want, but you can't raise an army on who was correct. And like, that's what you need to do to be able to like change hearts and minds and ultimately to bring equality and advance power.
And I mean, I think that the Rick Perlstein books that I was talking about, the reason that he has tracked this so much is kind of to make kind of and he was a Warren guy. He wasn't like a Bernie guy, but Rick Perlstein, I mean, specifically, but like,
yeah,
you know, he wants to empower liberals, progressives, you know, like to make them understand that this is a long-term project and to make them understand that conservatism has been a long-term project and that, you know, not that you can copy anything that like Richard Viguerie did, which, you know, the direct mailers, because obviously that kind of thing doesn't work now, but the understanding that like this apparatus gets built from the bottom, right? Like this apparatus kind of in like, enrages and fuels a grassroots movement. And we kind of think about grassroots because we've kind of been, you know, we've been kind of disempowered by like the Obama administration and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, well, these things kind of get captured by someone like Obama, where they have, you know, an insane amount of grassroots support. And then all of a sudden they get elected and just like don't care about their grassroots movement anymore. But that's not the way that things should work. And it's not the way that things could work. If you had someone like Bernie that like really understood the power of like an organized grassroots force of people that were you know, paying a small amount of money and actually felt invested within the campaign itself, like whether or not that ends up being like the seed that, you know, creates like a whole bunch of different flowers, like it should be. And we should understand that these things are not, they don't happen overnight. And I think that honestly, I mean, there's a part of me that probably would get absolutely destroyed by people on Twitter for thinking this, but like when I see what the lack of everything that Biden's done during coronavirus, I have to wonder a little bit, like electing Bernie during coronavirus itself as a nonstop parade, I think of temporary victories and defeats, because like every time we kind of get money towards something, like we get a bunch of money towards something and then it's like, oh, well, it's going to expire in 6 months. Like it's hard to imagine that.
Yeah, and it's heavily means tested too. You know, there's all kinds of caveats.
Oh, well, it always is with the Democratic Party, but like it's, you know, it's
yeah, Republicans don't care. By the way, Democrats started that off as a way to impress Republicans, and Republicans do not care at all.
Yeah,
don't care. Like do not care even a little bit, and we'll go to the point of saying, I think that means testing is not important. And then Democrats, yeah, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna do more of it.
Yeah,
because
like,
we think it makes us look cool.
Do you want
Nobody thinks you look cool.
They're like, well, would you want rich people to benefit from this program? And it's like, I listen,
and that's a tiresome argument. I don't want to hijack with that, but yeah.
But this is the second. I wanted to play the second.
But the last thing I want to say on that point is that I think what people have failed to understand is that impatience is in of itself a pacification mechanism.
At the same time, I mean, I think it's hard.
No. But I need to be explicitly clear about this.
I know
our entire culture.
I agree with you on that point. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, like with.
But we're being trained to be impatient. These things that that we're dealing with, not like this specifically, but all the social media apparatus, it's training us to be impatient. It's training us to reward immediate gratification because that's what helps in a consumer society. So if you realize that, you can engage with it honestly, then you can have more of a Zen-like perspective and kind of like pull back and like see it for what it is.
Well, to be fair, I mean,
it's hard to have that during climate change. You know what I mean? Like that's a specific issue where it's hard to be that.
I was just gonna say, and I'm not entirely disagreeing, but I mean, I think it depends on.
It's okay to disagree. I do it all the time
in society, and for some people, this is like some of the problems we face are much more urgent and directly felt by.
Well, of course they are, but but I'm not just. But here's the thing: you can hold two ideas in your head, right? Yes.
The dialectic, folks, that is called the dialectic.
Climate change is like,
if you learn nothing else from this podcast,
conservation, the time for conservation was 30 years ago. We have to worry about terraforming this planet now, and that's how it should be coached. The language needs to be reframed to terraform, not Mars, not the moon, but this planet. That is literally the only thing that will save this entire race of people and like all of humanity is to be able to do that. But that's not what we're talking. We're talking about like, carbon taxes and this and that. I'm like, that is so in the rear view. That's like 2 cities ago, like in the rear view.
I'll let you play your clip, Forrest. I'm sorry. I just wanted to add that.
I'm fine with this. This is the type of conversation that I'm used to having.
Well, for
yeah,
me,
it's fine.
The thing that I liked about that clip with Carpenter talking about Reagan, I think he's right. That line he had about, I think it's gone even farther than Reagan. I mean, the Reagan Revolution never left, but now these forces are even farther to the right than Reagan. And I think he has a point, because I always tell people, I mean, what do conservatives really want to conserve anymore? It seems like they just sort of want to wreck everything.
It should be the
money and power.
Yeah,
it should be the consumer.
It's just a reactionary movement. Yeah,
it should be the consumerative party, like or the consumerative. Like, but the thing about it going farther is that after Reagan, I mean, it's the same thing with Thatcher. Like, after Reagan, the neoliberal turn hit the Democrats harder than like the reason HW lost, his race and is that well, his second race, not his 1988 race, but the reason that HW lost a second term is because Bill Clinton took the neoliberal turn and did it better than he could. You know what I mean? Like, it's so when people are talking about
that's the whole third way motif, right?
Yeah,
like, that's how we led to the corporate Dems that we have of today. Like, it became like, hey, why don't we just like basically throw a middle finger to organized labor, abandon them completely, and like make it so that they don't have any ground to stand on for all the areas that they're strong in. And to be fair, it worked as a short-term goal. The problem is it advanced bad policy, and it moved the entire Overton window of American politics like 2 to 3 clicks over to the right, where it basically has stayed for the most part.
And that's, I think, when someone like John Carpenter understands that. I mean, which it's kind of refreshing to hear somebody in like a establishment, I guess, position like he, like, it's not established, but like someone who created like Halloween. It's kind of feels reaffirming, I guess, to have him understand that it was a conservative revolution, and it wasn't just like Reagan was bad and whatever happened from there happened from there. It feels good to me, at least, to understand that like he understands at least the part about the revolutionary aspect of it, because it was like both parties turned to that as soon as they could. But this is this is his other clip that I found during a different interview, talking about more specifically about the politics of it.
Child of the 60s. I grew up in a countercultural movement. Rock and roll, drugs, sex. It was a different time, and there's a lot of rebellion going on. Well, what I didn't know was that there was a giant backlash waiting to happen out there in America. And I was unaware of this, living in my own world, until Jimmy Carter kind of came along with these great intentions and was maligned and hated because he dared speak the truth to us, which is, we're using too much energy, we worship consumerism, all these things, the malaise speech. So Ronald Reagan came along, and Reagan we had him as governor of California before the country had him. He was this kind of amiable actor, politician who just had the dumbest ideas. And so Reagan got in, was elected because of this backlash I'm talking about. And his policies, poverty went up, homelessness went up. He destroyed the unions. He began to attack liberalism. He began to attack Roosevelt liberalism. To tell this from the story of the middle class or the working class. I could have told it from the middle class point of view of somebody who works at a TV station, for instance, and something strange is going on and they discover the truth. And it's happening through that TV station, or trying to support his family, but is out of luck. So I went that direction because I hadn't seen a movie like that. I hadn't seen a movie about the poor. I was involved with a comedy for a while earlier in the 80s and didn't get made for a variety of reasons. And in that movie, I wanted to critique the 80s in the same sort of thing, but the producers weren't having it. They just didn't see that. Not in this film.
Well,
that
let's go back to Parasite. How did Parasite win Best Picture? It managed to be
I thought you
Best
were gonna do a
Picture.
Reagan. I thought you were gonna do a Reagan impression going, well.
Well.
It's
too much Reagan talk in this show already, frankly.
This so that's the name of this podcast. Too much Reagan talk extravaganza.
With the number 2, too much.
But that last part I thought Andy was gonna be on, and we kind of had this long conversation when I was on Bad Takes last time about the 80s and how kind of you couldn't critique this idea of Reaganism because it seemed like it was so pronounced. It seemed like it was so all encompassing. This greed, this idea that, like the government isn't going to save you. The government needs to get reduced. The government is the problem. Like all of these ideas were so overly, like Audrey just got in with the door again. Jesus Christ. I feel like I'm in Jurassic Park with the fucking velociraptors, but, so those ideas had been so all-encompassing that you couldn't suddenly have a standard movie critiquing those ideas because all of a sudden, it was Morning in America. You know what I mean? Like audiences don't want to hear you critique the Reagan administration. Audiences don't want to hear you critique capitalism. They want to hear you, the only way you can really do it is to either have such an absurdist comedy like Tapeheads or something, or like, I mean, there's a lot of these, anyway, no, so it's like, hold on, you guys go. I'll finish the thought.
Yeah, I think you're onto something with that, right? I mean, JG, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, well, I was talking to Forrest about that earlier because in some ways I think a lot of people that love horror movies will say horror movie, the 80s were a bad time for horror movies. It's when we got the endless Jason sequels, the endless Halloweens and Freddy's. Yeah, but it was also the time where you could get films like They Live, like The People Under the Stairs, like Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, aka the only film I know of that basically takes the metaphor of it says that capitalism's logical conclusion is cannibalism. That's the punchline of the film. I think you could make those films in the 80s, and those films did get made, but it was done as sort of satire of yuppiedom. And you really see that in They Live and the aforementioned Tobe Hooper movie, the Texas Chainsaw sequel. So, but I think it all had to be done with like a very sort of absurdist lens, right?
Yeah, no, 100. That's the point that I was trying to like.
It's like another movie like that I think way too many young men misinterpret the film is like Scarface, because when I watch Scarface, I'm like, this is a black comedy about like what happens when you're a crazy, greedy capitalist that wants to have sex with your sister for some weird reason.
And also,
he's not an aspirational role model, as we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
You really missed the point on this. This is not
that movie. I think it's weird because I've known people that are like, they're like, well, why can't I have the hot tub like Tony Montana does? I'm just like,
well,
Tony Montana's a horrible person.
Rappers do it all the time, right? Like they say an aspirational line. They're like Tony Montana, and you're like, no, it's not. Also, it's
nothing to aspire to. Yeah.
I mean, I can understand wanting to live vicariously in the sense of like, you don't have this or that, but it's interesting because that movie is so excessive that you think people would look at it as sort of an absurd black comedy, but a lot of people don't. It's very
don't give people too much credit. That's another problem on the left, is we give people way too much credit. People are vacuous, not very intellectually curious, and honestly, I hate to say it, kind of dumb. And it doesn't mean they have to stay that way for forever. And it doesn't mean everyone should be treated like idiots either. But like, why would you give unearned credit for people for like believing things that you think are obvious when you've thought about them? Still, we shouldn't do that.
You know what I think? People got to put on the glasses.
Exactly. I mean, look at like the only hot tubber I can think of doing this kind of thing is Hassan Piker, right? Like I mean, like that's the only person I can think of, and even then, he's at the behest of the corporate gods, whose whims will change like who they're gonna slap down like a Greek god of legend with a lightning bolt, right? I mean,
there's words you can't say on this show.
You can't say them. People want to say them. You can't say them. It's cancel
You want to
culture.
talk about Ritz. You want to talk about Cheez-Its. Can't talk about those things anymore.
but I think it's all valid. I think it's all incredibly valid points. I mean, like, yeah, like, you know, Scarface is the perfect example of like, look, that's not like, you don't want to be like that guy. That guy's profiting off of like human misery, like quintessentially. Like, there's no ambiguity there whatsoever. At least with Breaking Bad, you had to like, hey, if this was a single payer healthcare, this would be like a 20-minute show.
Yeah, I always think that with Breaking Bad. Every time I rewatch it, I'm like, holy shit! None of this would have happened if it wasn't for like if we had single payer healthcare.
Let's also bring up, just since ostensibly this is a movie show, Scarface is a remake, and the immigrant part of the rags to riches story is kind of like what they leaned into with it, and that's what people do focus on. I think it's important. From the comments,
it's Oliver Stone very specifically. I mean, you know, as the writer of it, very specifically leaning into the Cuban.
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
which
Cuban,
that's
like,
a whole.
Yeah.
But that's a whole thing.
But the other thing is that Oliver Stone, after researching this, had a coke problem to the point where they needed to, you know, helicopter him over to Paris to fucking detox him and his like wife at the time, in order to write the script, because his research had taken quite a few turns that were bad enough that he needed to detox after the fact. He also almost died twice while researching it. But because he was hanging out with
he was researching so hard last night.
Man, I was researching so fucking hard last night. I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna be researching for a little bit.
But anyway, I love.
He also claims that now he can do a little coke at a party and he's fine. And he's like, listen, I don't do it like I used to. And it's like, Oliver Stone, just be careful, bro. Because I love Oliver Stone. I think Oliver Stone's like one of the most important directors and writers that we have right now. And you know, talking to Jim DiGenio, was a really great moment for the show. I like, you know, like that conversation was amazing. So like, I hope he's good and he takes care of himself.
Well, but so having something to do with that is like, think about the fact that when They Live came out, what movie came out the year before? Wall Street. Michael Douglas. Greed is good, right? Like that you have a young Charlie Sheen. People forget this plot all the time. And I mentioned it on one of the other episodes. I can't remember, but bilking his dad, Martin Sheen, who's like an old school, like union guy, basically fucking over his union to get ahead in the company. Right. So that's where the zeitgeist was around this, which is the fact that there was no alternate history of like, hey, maybe don't do this. You literally had one of the biggest movie stars of the day saying greed is good. That's where this was. So the fact that like They Live, you know, if we think of like, you know, some people thought it was heavy-handed at the time. I was like, heavy-handed? Have you seen what else is happening around here? Like, I mean, the whole yuppie personification thing, I barely understood. I was a child at the time. But even then, like, I get to hear from my dad is, you know, very much a working class dude of, you know, how full of crap he thought all of this stuff was. And to see it actually depicted on film in the same way that we think of like a movie like RoboCop as like an incredible, like, you know, character study and, you know, potential cautionary tale of privatization and things along those lines. It's all right here. And again, you're talking to someone that when I used to watch this movie, I would get so impatient about the first half hour. I'm like, oh, come on, can we just get to the good stuff? But like now, honestly, like on this most recent rewatch, it was maybe my favorite part. I'm like, God damn, like it's crazy. Because you see this little thing of like, you see them like, oh, they're interrupting the broadcast. Because let's remember the power of broadcast television at this point. This is before cable as we know it, let alone, you know, everyone's private YouTube channel. You could not get a message out. So they're interrupting the broadcast. Then you have this kind of slow unraveling of like, well, who's doing it? Oh, well, something going on in that church. That's interesting. Okay, there's this cat who's like, you know, kind of organizing all the unhoused people, and like he's maybe involved in some way, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. But it's such a slow unraveling. And Carpenter is just like, I'm not going to rush any part of this. Like, this is all important, because then when you have like, you know, the raising of the Shire, where they basically the cops come in and just, you know, annihilate the entire like encampment. Like it hits like super hard to the point that you almost forget you're watching a science fiction movie. You're like, oh yeah, this is ostensibly about aliens. But it's really about all of those things, because the idea is, the alien concept of, like humanity being not forced to, cajoled into imbibing in its own worst impulses, which is why the human collaborator part of it's so fascinating.
Yeah. And really, I mean, really it is this idea that, you can kind of fuck everybody else over because your own lot in society has been so bad as someone who's working class or as someone who's like living in poverty that, like the drift, like there's that moment where
the fuck you got mine. What's the actor's name? JG.
George Buck Flower is the bum that turns into the suit. Yeah.
That turn, and that's such a I was like, oh my god, that's that bum guy, and like he sold out. I didn't sell out, I bought in, whatever the phrase.
Well, no, but he says like people sell out every day, which
that's
to be fair, I mean, is a true point in the sense of like you go to work, like it's this kind of like disempowering kind of almost like it's the yuppie phrase, right? Like, listen, like it doesn't really matter that I've sold out because listen, we all sell out every day, man. Like we go to work, we kind of sell out. We have corporate bosses, and it's like, don't I deserve mine? And it's like, but like that's with like that comes at the price of ending class solidarity. It comes at the price
not only that, but that character, I find it interesting. He's like, well, I got my suit now, and I'm living large and all that.
That's probably all he has. Considering it's
eventually, like they're going to drain the planet dry, and then they're going to throw you to the curb too.
But the thought, I guess, is somebody living in that amount of poverty and squalor is like, I was already thrown to the curb. Why not try to get a little bit of the good life? Like he says it in the same way that that fucking Danny DeVito says it in It's Always Sunny, where he throws the fucking balloon and he's like, here's a taste of the good life, you fucking shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's in the same like, don't you want a little taste of the good life? Everybody does. And he says it in such like a submissive and almost like like almost like a sexual way. Like he's like, you know what I mean? Like he's like, oh, everyone wants a little, don't kill me. Everyone wants a little, don't you want a little taste of the good life? And it's like, Jesus Christ. But I wanted to throw to this because this is the first time I was sitting in a college class, a media class. And I had this professor named Howie Good, and I still Facebook friends with him. He was awesome, but he was like one of those like new left kind of crank dudes that that like I love those kinds of guys. But like the whole class was based on like understanding media. And the first time I ever heard of Zizek was he played the pervert's guide to ideology in a lecture that he gave. So I grabbed the scene from because this is the first scene I ever remember hearing Zizek talking about, where he's like the trash can of ideology. And
so good.
So I wanted to play that. By the way, I think we're gonna do the pervert's guide to sometime this winter. I think we're gonna do the pervert's guide to cinema with Russell and Russell Zabriglia. Wow. And I think we're gonna do that as an episode of this, because I think that it would be an awesome fucking episode. But here we go.
Eating from the trash can all the time. The name of this trash can is ideology. The material force of ideology makes me not see what I'm effectively eating. It's not only our reality which enslaves us. The tragedy of our predicament when we are within ideology is that when we think that we escape it into our dreams, at that point, we are within ideology. They Live from 1988 is definitely one of the forgotten masterpieces of the Hollywood left. Dictatorship in democracy. It's the invisible order which sustains your apparent freedom. According to our common sense, we think that ideology is something blurring, confusing our straight view. Ideology should be glasses which distort our view. And the critique of ideology should be the opposite. Like you take off the glasses so that you can finally see the way things really are.
Preach. Testify.
So that you can see how things really are.
I know I can. Not the screen, but I can see everything else.
I have to admit, I love Zizek is like the best. Just real quick Zizek story. I've talked to him once, and he was supposed to talk to me for 20 minutes. Went 50, and then I had another interview to do, and he couldn't stop talking. He was like, "What is Pittsburgh like? I remember the time I went to see a play of Sodom's Last Dance. I wanted to see the pretty ladies, but I fell asleep from the jet lag." And he is just the funniest, most affable person I have talked to. And then
on the show.
So he
Yes.
so he came. Well,
We'll get Frank Grillo and Zizek at the same time.
So I
would be 100% in for that, by the way.
So
That'd be amazing.
he came on TMBS a few months before Michael passed away. That was like one of Michael's like I need to like, you know what I mean, like his dream interviews. There was like 4 of them. It was like Cornel West, who came on, Zizek. He did his interview with Lula and Noam Chomsky, which amazing. Right. He did all 4 of his, like, you know, before he passed away. But Zizek came on the first time and was talking to Michael, and I was talking to him about this, and he was talking about how next time he was in the city, they were going to get, like, you know, Cat's Deli, like they were going to go get bagel. Like, it was just the funniest interview I've ever fucking seen in my life. And then Michael passed, and I rode kind of shotgun on this Cornel West Zizek conversation that Leisha, like Michael's sister, did after the fact. And it was just Cornel West and Zizek going back and forth for an hour and a half. And I was on the Zoom call for that. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my fucking life. And then, you know, I ended up actually talking to him and like going back, like back and forth and like having a good conversation when he came on Give Them an Argument with Russell. And, you know, that was a really fun conversation. He like roasted the setup because I had this mural. Audrey's back and opened the door again. He had this mural behind him I had this mural behind me that I always had, where it had a picture of a mountain. And he's like, "Is this really the mountain behind you?" And I was like, because I was telling him that, you know, New Paltz has the Schwangong Mountain or whatever that's like right behind, you know, right out the window that I could see from my apartment. And I was like, "No, it's not that mountain." He's like, "The greatest Lacanian paradox. You sweep away the mural, and then all of a sudden you can see the mountain behind you." And this is so he kind of roasted and then he went off on a whole thing. He was supposed to get off the call because he had other things to do. Like it was the same thing that you're talking about, where it's like, you know, it goes from like a 20-minute to 50-minute.
It sounds like we was booking for 15 minutes and he's good. Like we'll have him for the whole show, right?
But he was
he
on a bunch of
actually
different...
said to me, I said, "I have to get going, Slavoy," and he says, "Oh, you just tell me to shut up. I keep going on too much."
Yeah, I think he said the same thing to Ben, actually, when we had him give him an argument.
My dream was to talk to Zizek and be able to ask him what he thinks of the band Laibach, and that dream was fulfilled. And then he went on and talked about Rammstein for another 20 minutes. So even more fulfilled after that one. Yeah, Zizek's great.
But yeah, so I remember, you know, having the chance to talk to him kind of twice. I just think back to that class that I was in, where the first thing I'd never heard of Zizek at the time. I'd only heard of liberal thinkers, and the first thing that I the first time I ever experienced him was the Pervert's Guide to Ideology in this college class, and like I think back on it now, like, you know, being like, oh shit, like I've talked to that dude, and like, but that I needed to play that for the reason, you know, that was the first.
Well, I love his identification of They Live as sort of like a classic example of, you know, I remember how exactly I would describe it. Basically, like, you know, agitprop American critical thinking, like, liberalist theory. I think that's again, consider the year. I was real busy being like 9 or 10, depending on when you watched it. But like, I mean,
yeah, did that take up your whole schedule?
It was real busy. I was real busy with my Transformers, so sorry, I can't speak too eloquently for it.
I was going to say his commentary on They Live. I mean, I know Zizek, some people have issues with his opinions on a lot of things, but I think when it comes to that clip that he does in the Pervert's Guide to Ideology, I think it's one of the most spot on things he has said with regards to his film criticism.
Yeah. No, it definitely.
Well, because the thing is, this is an important movie because it's an important sci-fi film, but it's also an important movie because, like, frankly, we're still living in this, right? Like,
it's the embodiment of what he's talking about in the Pervert's Guide to Ideology. It's a movie about ideology,
And it's amazing to me that, like, I was talking to someone that was stoked about us doing this, and had just like watched They Live for the first time, and basically expressed, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of frightening how poignant and accurate this still is. And she was like, yeah, that is kind of that's a good point. And because it really, like Carpenter says, not that much has changed right now. Of course, like, they're not actual, like, the whole thing, the David Icke's theory, like the lizard people, and like, the anti-Jewish sentiment, this and that, that's all nonsense. But like,
it's interesting because the lizard people thing, I mean, I get it as a metaphor, but when you literalize it, it's like David Icke is being literal.
What he says,
it makes sense as a metaphor for like power elites.
But I like how he was like, no, I literally think that they're lizard people. Like, it was like,
right,
oh, okay, well, that's fucking nuts, and you're a fucking crazy person. But yeah, again, like, I'm gonna throw it up on the screen. I didn't read this earlier, so this is John Carpenter's tweet that says They Live is about yuppies and unrestrained capitalism.
Good to read it, because I keep forgetting that this is also an audio podcast.
Yeah, I usually am better about it, but yeah. So just John Carpenter in 2017. They Live is about yuppies and unrestrained capitalism. It has nothing to do with Jewish control of the world, which is a slander and a lie. And I think that's important for him to say, because like there's this whole world of this, what I call them like new metal conspiracy theories, where it's just sort of like, it used to be fun, and now it's like, oh, this is like just pointless aggression with no output. And that's what conspiracy theories are now. Like, it's sort of like, we used to love on tour, we listen to Art Bell. We listen to like Coast to Coast Radio, like when you're like driving late at night and stuff, because it's great. It's creepy. It sounds like the X-Files. Awesome. But like now, that's just like, it's mainstream. Like, your grandma believes it, right? Like, it's not fun anymore when your grandma believes it. Where it's like, no, that sucks. I think this is like the stained of like your conspiracy theories or something,
Well, I think
the drowning pool.
I think Nando Villa put it perfectly on Weekends one time, and I only remember this because I was working and editing Weekends, which I guess RIP, they're not going to do that show anymore. But
we're not saying there's a correlation, but then maybe there's a correlation.
Nando said something amazing, which is that the left doesn't really need conspiracy theories, because our theory of of capitalism kind of being the thing that's causing a lot of these things has encompasses enough things that like it doesn't need a conspiracy theory on top of it to be true. It just is, it just is a critique of the economic system. It just is a critique of the political system. And the right version of that is, they go all over the place, whether it's, a Jewish control of the media and capital and, all of these things, or whether it's, like there's a whole bunch of different ones, like, saying just the government wants to control you. The government wants to control you for the sake of controlling you.
Yeah.
No other, well, why do they want to control you? Well, they want to control you. Like, you know what I mean? Like these critiques, once you add capital to it, it's like, well, no, there's no fucking Jewish conspiracy. Like, obviously that doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist is because it's a capitalist conspiracy that transcends all other factors. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it transcends religion, it transcends race, it transcends all of these things. It's just people with money trying to utilize, oppress, and extract resources and extract labor from people that don't have that power. Because you can, maintain your status, because you can maintain your wealth, because you can maintain your money, because you can maintain your capital by oppressing those people. It doesn't need to be deeper than that. But the fact that, right-wing conspiracy theorists don't have that because they fundamentally believe that capitalism is good. They fundamentally believe that whether you want to call it capitalism or, as John Carpenter does, unrestrained capitalism is good. It needs to be something else. It needs to be something way crazier because in their own minds, they can't fundamentally see the hierarchical system at play, being the problem.
I was just going to say, the issue with this, the issue I have always had with conspiracy theories, and I've talked to people like Jim DiEugenio about this. I think especially with the right wing, I think there are instances where people conspire to do things. People go to boardroom meetings and talk about strategizing.
Well, it's the Oliver Stone
that's
thing,
class
right?
power
Like,
work.
what is
right?
a conspiracy? It's two or more people deciding.
Yeah, well, people conspire to do things. That's true. The thing is, the right wing conspiracy culture is like they have this mentality of like, if we just get rid of the bad guy, then everything will go and be meritocratic again. And it's kind of like dumb, and grand conspiracy narratives like that are driven by this idea of, if we can just get rid of the bad people that are in power, then everything will be fixed.
Well,
and that's not how it works. I think that's why the left is so much better
because
at
they
things.
can't, by definition, can't have a structural critique, right? Like
Yeah.
a structural critique would involve capitalism. A structural critique would involve the ways that business conspires with the government in order to oppress large amounts of people, because the government is literally just the thing that's mediating these relationships between labor and capital. Like, that's all it really is. There's no like, at this point, not maybe not in the past that John Carpenter is talking about, where kind of labor seemed to have the upper hand for a quick second during the FDR days, or at least they were trying to make some kind of deal in order to placate labor and have people have enough of a relationship to their to capital to feel like they don't need to do, they don't need this conflict. But like, in general, if you don't have a critique of capital, you have to come up with some kind of other boogeyman. And it comes out in the way of immigrants. It comes out in the way of the Jewish conspiracy. It comes out in the way of all of these different ideas I
was just going to say, you also come to this erroneous conclusion. Like, it's like when, to me, it's like, okay, some horrible person like a Harvey Weinstein went to jail, or, Jeffrey Epstein's dead. But there's, as long as there's a system that is structurally producing people that are abusive when they have power, you're going to just see people like that you're going to have other versions of them, right? Like, if you want a better society, you have to look at things structurally, right?
Yeah.
And like, what are the structures that produce people that engage in abuse of others, Whereas I think a conspiracy theorist is like, no, we just get rid of the bad Illuminati people, and then everyone will live happily ever after. And it doesn't.
And it's the same. Well, it's the same thing that liberals feel like with with the police, like, you know what I mean, or with government, or like, oh, we get rid of Donald Trump and everything's back to normal and it's fine. We can go back to brunch. That's the guy, Donald Trump. We get rid of George Bush. Everything goes back to normal. That's the guy, George Bush. We get rid of these police officers, the few bad eggs, or you know what I mean, the few bad seeds within the police apparatus, and everything goes back to normal. Normal is fine. Normal is good. Normal, my social instincts are kind of placated by normal. You know what I mean? Placated by normal. And Sean, you know, but you placate these certain elements, and then things are back to, you're fine again. You're living your life again. It doesn't really matter. And I think Donald Trump is the ultimate manifestation of that, because it's somebody that the liberals could fully find as the guy. That's the guy.
Right.
Donald Trump.
Well,
that's the guy. Get rid of him. Life is normal again.
Tying this back into They Live, what's interesting about They Live, if you compare it to Carpenter's other movies, yes, I know, spoilers, that Roddy Piper's character doesn't make it through till the end. He sacrifices himself. But it's a weird thing about this
30
movie.
seconds before the end.
What's that?
They said he makes it through till 30 seconds.
Yeah,
before
well,
the end.
yeah. But what's weird is like watching it again. Maybe this is why right wingers like this, because it appeals to that sense of like, oh well, if we just overthrow the bad people. I mean, it's less downbeat than a lot of his other films. You watch Prince of Darkness or In the Mouth of Madness, or even The Thing. Those are like just apocalyptically dreary in their endings. Whereas They Live is actually pretty funny with the, she slaps the alien in the face or whatever.
Tucker Carlson's trying to drink at a bar and
yeah. Well, it's like I don't think there's any. It's not as ambiguous as a lot of his other films. Like Halloween 3, they're that's like a dark, ambiguous ending. Like, oh, they didn't stop it. But like with They Live, well, what are the aliens going to do now? They're screwed. Like it's over.
Halloween
There's going to
3
be war.
is not as ambiguous in its ending as.
All right, so I've been trying to find like a way in for the last 10 minutes. I swear, but like I want to talk about the conspiracy theorists of it. There was a really great small scale scene in Don't Look Up, which I quite liked. A lot of people that don't understand nuance seem to have a real problem with it, and it's basically the.
I haven't watched it yet, but we are trying to make inroads into David Sirota to try to get him to come on to talk.
Yeah, David Sirota and Adam McKay wrote that. Yeah, exactly. And I think the people that call it yesified or whatever can fuck off forever because they're wrong, and that's a simpleton's understanding of the movie. But whether people like it or not, whatever. Point of fact, there's an amazing small scale scene that I think most people are going to forget about, where basically they're talking about this character who's like an Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos type, right? Where it says like, oh, I heard he built an underground bunker for him and all his executives. And someone's like, no, I heard they built an escape ship. And it was like, you guys, the truth is more depressing. They're not even smart enough to be as evil as you're giving them credit for. And it's one of my favorite lines because it's so true. And all these conspiracy theories, it's like, you think these people are like operating at this very high level to trick you. They're just like craven, self-involved, and they're trying to look out for themselves. It really isn't that hard to understand.
See, but it's easier to believe in that because then if someone believes like, oh, they're evil geniuses, and if we just stop them, then everything will be fine.
It's easy.
That's easier for them to deal with.
Because there's a good guy and a bad guy, and you defeat the bad guy, and you win the day, right? And that's like a whole lot of folks that have like a conservative mindset never advance beyond that, never got beyond like the cowboys and Indians, like good guy bad guy mindset, which that's very telling. But I think again, I really wanted to get in on the conspiracy theory part, but you guys were just the whole time. That like that's way more true. Like I mean, like fact of the matter is like politics is much more like Veep than House of Cards, frankly. Like it's not like it's much more just ineptitude and like self-involvement than it is like outright like evil, and that's the worst thing about it. But what I think They Live does very well, using the product of its time, is show the power of media to amplify voices and amplify ideas. Like in this case is broadcast television, because right, remember, and the thing you have to understand, and for folks that are watching this movie that are younger, they may not get like, why do they care about a TV station? That was it. That was the only way to talk to a large group of people. Like unless you had a shortwave radio, you're not getting a hold of. So the idea of like broadcast television, which honestly is turned towards cable television as far as how much influence that it has, but the influence hasn't waned, it's just changed. And there is an ethos that comes from cable television, and what people on our side don't like to hear is ostensibly liberal but not progressive in any way, shape, or form. It's corporatist liberal, and that's been the case since what we talked about with the 90s and Clinton and like the whole like new Democrat, they called it, right, third way kind of mindset, which never left.
The neoliberal turn, right? Like it's the neoliberal turn towards liberalism being kind of just a sad, slightly more it's like willing to discuss
more female CEOs, it's that shit.
Well, and slightly more willing to discuss the welfare state in the sense of reforming it, which means defunding it, but still kind of willing to be like, oh well, we believe in Social Security the same way FDR, back in the day was like,
it's the Caitlyn Jenner Pepsi commercial is what it is.
Well, it's the same way FDR called it back in the day, when he said his opponents, like they like to stand up and say, we believe in Social Security, we believe in all these things, but turn them over to us. We won't spend a dime. You know what I mean? Like it's the same way where it's back in the time of the New Deal. FDR was calling it, like his enemies were saying, turn over the welfare state to us. We can do them better. We can do them, more efficiently, and it won't cost anybody a dime. That's not how it works. That's not how a state that actually cares about its citizenry works. That's not how that cares about class works. It's literally, it's just the draining of the welfare state. And FDR called it from the day that he set it up to the Clinton era, where it's like you can talk about Social Security all you want. If your plan is reforming Social Security, reforming the welfare state, welfare reform, like it's just a draining of funds.
Well, and so Forrest, this goes back to a point that I've made many times. I don't know if it's on this show or not, that like if anybody ostensibly on the left or believing in the fact that like cops have gone too far and they're doing racist action, all cops are bastards, et cetera, et cetera. If anyone really believe that, the thing you do is you talk about police reform. You don't talk about defund the police, because that's poor framing. What it is catharsis. So you can have catharsis or you can have results, one or the other. And there's a model for this. And you don't have to like the results or the actions of what the model was created for to understand how this works. Yeah. Oh, I don't want to use weasel language. Well, would you rather get something done and use some weasel language, or would you rather just feel good shouting something? And that's what it comes down to.
I think defund the police is police reform. I mean, no,
it isn't. It isn't. It's called defund police. People think that it doesn't make any sense whether they believe it or not. They think it means no money to the police. That's what they think.
No, but
it doesn't matter.
What I'm saying is on a policy level.
What I'm saying is it doesn't policy. Nobody gives a flying fuck about policy. People care about how something makes them feel. Defund the police makes them scared. So you call it police reform and do the same shit. That's all you need to do. Solved. Done. And we didn't do that. And the ostensible way, as far as someone that believes that the police is overly militarized, I got some firsthand examples. But like to achieve that goal, you got to think it doesn't feel good to shout police reform, though. It doesn't feel good to shout that.
We didn't. All right, so we could just dedicate a whole podcast to my feelings.
Well, but the thing is, nobody understands language.
We didn't get a chance to. We didn't get a chance to even make the case for that, because Joe Biden is Mr. I'm going to give more money to the police guy. You know what I mean? Well,
because people thought that the definition of defund the police was to give no money whatsoever to the police and leave cities unguarded.
No, it was.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can sit there and like fuck with the definition all you want. That is what the poll tested. Are people dumb? Yes. Is that stupid? Absolutely. That's what people thought. And so that's why they were like, this is not popular. Let's run against this. And that way we can have a sister soldier moment or whatever the hell Carville was suggesting.
I agree with the second part of it, that people are now running against it. But I also think that it didn't really get a chance to even be put in front of people until corporate Democrats redefined the meaning of it. I don't think that necessarily
there's no redefinition. It's a terrible phrase. Like it's look, read Lakoff.
I'm not dedicated to any.
What's better?
What's
better? What's better? Is saying pro-life better or saying anti-choice? Which better?
Anti-choice is better than.
Yeah, it's better language, right? So again, if you talk about police reform or defund the police, which do you think?
I'm not dedicated to any slogan. The problem that I have with the slogan police reform, and listen, if somebody had come with the same policy set and said this is police reform, I would be 100% on board with it.
Absolutely.
The problem is that you get someone like Eric Adams running on police reform, whose definition of police reform is these tiny little maneuvers that don't actually do anything, because he is by definition
it's kabuki, right? It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything.
It's hard to any like if progressive candidates did run on police reform, I would 100% support that phrasing of it. I'm not stuck on defund the police as a thing. It works better for me.
Right, but a lot of people are, and including people that are viewers of the show.
Police abolition, which I think is the dumbest fucking way you can put it. Police because
that's just like kick yourself in the dick instead.
Are never going to go for that, which is the thing that we said on fucking Give Them an Argument, which was incredibly unpopular. You know what I mean? Like people are like, oh, you don't stand for police abolition? No, because that is not the way to put that.
I think, yeah, I mean, I get where Conan's coming from because
I'm going to correct you on air because you did it twice. Conan, not Conan.
I'm sorry, Conan.
Thank you.
Yeah,
don't worry, I did it to Francesca.
I feel like a jerk, but no, I was gonna say, yeah, I think a lot of times you just have to meet people where they're at. So, like, I mean, there's a few people in Pittsburgh that I know and work with on, like, you know, reform of like U.S. foreign policy, military budgeting, stuff like that. Like people that are concerned about the militarization,
sure,
of America, right? But it's difficult to talk
By the way,
about.
I actually didn't know that you were. I didn't know that you were based out of Pittsburgh, and like my best friend lives there. I should come visit both of you guys. And hang
Definitely.
out.
By the way,
But,
I love Pittsburgh and have played Pittsburgh way more than Philadelphia because I think it's a far
Yeah.
superior city.
But-
so there you go.
The best city in the world. No.
What I was gonna say is, so, you know, sometimes you have to meet people where they're at. So if you have views that are like pro peace or anti-war, there's gonna be a lot of people that like are like, oh, what do you mean? We need a strong defense force. And you know, I've found that, you know, my way with meeting those people at times is to play to their like anger over higher taxes. I'm like, well, do you want the defense budget to be so high?
Sure.
You have to meet people where they're at, though, and I think that's what you're saying.
Well, you're right, because and so what you're talking about is coming from a place of curiosity, right? Like you'll be like, well, what's important to you? Well, here's the deal. No matter if you agree with me or not that we shouldn't be waging wars against these, you know, whatever brown people of the day is who we're targeting. Fact is, this costs a lot of money that we could be used to fix these goddamn roads, like make sure that you and your family have health care, so on and so on. Like those are things that get people listening, which is one of the reasons the Sanders campaign had such salience. And the fact that so many people that ostensibly agree with you know, folks such as ourselves, like, you know, viewers of the show, like don't understand that it's okay to not 100% agree with every part of someone's lifestyle to actually form a coalition with them. It's a problem. And it's a problem if you want to advance power. If you want to just yell shit and like be the most popular person on Twitter yelling about shit or whatever, great. That's on you, you know? But if you want to actually advance power, you need to understand how language works. And to be honest, the right wing runs circles around the ostensible American left. And I say ostensible because there really is no American left. It's a coalition of assholes all fucking sniping at each other. But like, I think the problem is that if you have some knowledge of how language works and how people react to emotion rather than facts, like the whole idea, oh, well, they'll fact attack them. Doesn't matter at all. Nobody gives a damn about your facts. They're going to be like, untrusted source of information. Access list drop.
Which is you can tell really well if you look at a history of anti-imperialism and imperialism from the time of like Stephen Kinzer wrote like a really good book with The True Flag, which is like, you know, there's been a lot of times throughout our history where Americans have been ostensibly kind of isolationist and have kind of believed, hey, we need to not really go into World War I. We need to not really go into World War II. They were, you know, until somebody kind of either fabricated Vietnam too, like until somebody kind of fabricated a story about like a battleship getting blown up or kind of I mean, Pearl Harbor wasn't fabricated. You know what I mean? Like Pearl Harbor, like, but still, like an attack happens on American soil, and then everyone is gung ho about going into a different country, right? Like these isolationist and anti-imperialist moments don't really last that long once emotions kind of kick up. It's like, you know, whether you want to believe the conspiracy about FDR knowing ahead of, I don't believe it, but about FDR knowing ahead of time that something like Pearl Harbor was going to happen. I mean, I do kind of believe it with 9/11, that the Bush administration, not that they orchestrated it, but I do believe that they kind of knew ahead of time that maybe there was going to be some kind of attack on American soil, and they didn't act in the way that you would if you really wanted to protect, you know, a number of landmarks from being destroyed.
So ultimately, at the core of it, I'm a musician, and part of being a musician means that there's a certain amount of people that are artistic, but they trend a little bit more towards
artistic or no.
Frankly, both. That trend towards like libertarianism, right? That are more like they're good people, but they have like some, just get out of my business mindsets. Now, some of these same people were for marriage equality well before Gavin Newsom started marrying people in San Francisco, well before that was in the zeitgeist. But they were more coming at from perspective of, I don't care. As long as they have gay divorce too, who gives a shit? Like, which is fucking hilarious. And I agree with that because they didn't think, but the thing is, there were so many people like, well, no, we need to have part of marriage equality is to say that it's marriage, this and that, which for me come from perspective of someone that's abjectly secular humanist, non-religiosity perspective. I'm like, why does that matter? Why don't you look at it as an equal rights issue? Because if you take care of it as an equal rights issue, then that takes care of like 17 other arguments that we haven't even understood yet. At the time, that would have been like trans rights, so on and so on. This is like 15, 16 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is that people are like, well, no, we need gay marriage. We need gay marriage now. I'm like, well, yeah, but it's a matter of equality, right? So if you take care of the equality, everything else kind of comes in the package. Maybe someone's not shouting the correct phrase, but there's plenty of people that don't believe a single thing you believe economically, or maybe even foreign policy style, that believe in that. So why don't we actually achieve some equality?
Gay marriage is good economically. Like,
absolutely it is. Are you fucking kidding me?
Like that's the thing about kind of having a social liberal policy, like, is that it's
that's why, sorry to interrupt, but like that's why I was for marijuana legalization, even though I don't actually give a flying fuck about marijuana, because I'm like, this is going to bring in so much money that we can use to like all these great social programs and like fixing the roads.
John Carpenter is going to make so many more fucking good
John Carpenter's going to have so many more epiphanies and make so many more cool movies. Like, it doesn't matter if I specifically benefit from it. Like, that's a communal investment. That's like, there shouldn't be prohibition of that, whether I like it personally or not.
It's funny because I think this whole conversation loops back into They Live, especially with the, you have the image up of the billboards.
I didn't do that enough by mentioning John Carpenter's smoking.
Well, what I was going to say is
the man likes to smoke.
The images that you see in the movie without the glasses on, they're colorful and they're about hitting that sort of reptile emotion brain, right? Like the famous,
perfect example is the garbage truck says danger right turn on it, which I thought was fucking amazing. Like even his non-glasses mediated imagery has like the danger right turn, don't go this way.
Well, it's like when he puts the glasses on though, it's sort of taking out all the it's stripping all the emotional manipulation away of the advertising. And I think that's an interesting point. People are more affected by emotions than, my facts, So, and I think the movie touches on that.
Which is the exact problem with the fucking Carter administration, right? Like, whether you think that some of what Carter was trying to do was righteous or not. I mean, John Carpenter seems to. Like, it ends up being like these, like 100 points to hit on this one issue, and that's like kind of the beginning of this like Hillary Clinton mentality of policy, where it's like instead of someone like FDR who was willing to just be like, listen, something like Social Security, everybody gets it. It started being these means tested 100 points on this issue.
Wait a second, you're blaming means testing on Jimmy Carter?
No, I'm not blaming means testing on Jimmy Carter. I'm just saying universal programs work better than kind of like a targeted 100-point thing, which I don't know. I just listen. I've been listening to the Matt Christman Hell of Presidents thing at the same time. So hearing
give him the show so I can yell at him, by the way. Go ahead.
Well, he came on, giving them an argument and yelled at Ben, and it made Ben feel awkward.
I'll yell at Ben and Matt. I don't give a fuck. Go ahead.
It would be fun that would be an amazing episode. Just you yelling at both Christman and Ben Burgess.
I love both of those dudes, but I have so much I want to yell at them about. Like I'll put it on the list. I'm gonna
let's try to make a future. When my not working for Give Them an Argument anymore is a little less awkward. Let's try to make a future. Conan yells at Conan.
That's how we met. I was yelling at Burgess about a freaking trial of the Chicago 7, right?
Yeah. So this is
Anyway,
my last
whatever.
clip
That's
I wanna-
it. Back in your point. Sorry.
This is my last clip I want to play, and this is the one that I have to say, ... as a filmmaker, I felt, I haven't done too much of that lately, but as a filmmaker, I feel very inspired by John Carpenter as a figure. And I wanted to play this as our last clip because we've kind of gone over a lot of different things. And this is him talking about like how he kept this film very, very bare budgeting, and how he felt like he realized that through this film, the one thing that he would never compromise is his own vision. And I fucking love that. I fucking love that so much.
He's
like,
a goddamn badass, man. Carpenter he's rad.
So I felt like inspired as fuck last night watching this, but here we go.
And it comes out like this.
So I thought, well, fuck you. I'll do it in my own movie. So I did.
What's your problem?
Sidney King designed aliens on a napkin. Well, you saw them in black and white, except for the very end. They had sort of metallic eyes, and they looked alien, And they were simple to do. We had one mask, and I have to reveal to you that only one actor played all the aliens. That's the stuntman Jeff Amata. Everyone, male and female. It was domestic, and Carolco was foreign distributors. And they were so low budget, everybody won. So it was perfect for me, and I had final cut, and I agreed to make them for very little money.
All the sex and violence on the screen has gone too far for me. Filmmakers like George Romero and John Carpenter have to show some restraint.
One of the things I learned in film school is that you have to fight for some things that are really important to you. And one of the things that I decided, or I learned, was that my vision is worth fighting for.
I just want to say very quickly, I love that bit in the movie at the end where the no independent thought thing comes up, and what is it the guy on the TV says? Oh, these Carpenter films, these Romero films.
Yeah.
Because that was a big thing in the 80s.
They're not
The
taking
video
any
nasties.
responsibility. Yeah, exactly.
That was a big thing though. A lot of films were like attacked for existing.
Sure, by people like
all the sex and violence
and
on
Joe
screen is too
Lieberman.
far.
Yep.
There's all the sex and violence on screen has gone too far for me. Filmmakers like George Romero and John Carpenter have to show some restraint.
Which is a pretty great internal callback, frankly, because it's sort of parodying something he was actually dealing with, and I think that's fantastic.
And it's also big dick John Carpenter. Like he, you know what I mean? Like he's putting himself on the same level as George A. Romero, who is at this point, I mean, has created.
I would say Carpenter's probably like more well regarded now than Romero is. I mean,
no, 100% now. But I'm saying, like, this is in the 80s. George A. Romero would come out with Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Like, he had killed it with those fucking movies. And
no, respect the flex. Let's be clear, respect the flex. Yeah.
So putting himself on that level, I think, it kind of is a flex on John Carpenter's part. But it has played out in the long run, right? Like Halloween is like the fucking classic. The Thing is seen as like one of the best fucking sci-fi movies of all time. They like all of these movies are seen now, but it is funny like to write yourself in the script to be like, listen, me, George Romero.
I
mean, rad.
I was gonna say I think in terms of as a filmmaker, I agree that he gets very, very uncompromising with his vision, especially like when he starts. I mean, even movies that are lesser Carpenter, like say Escape from L.A. I mean, he basically made that whole film to make fun of Hollywood and how much he hates Hollywood and the restrictions he has.
Big Trouble in Little China, right? Like it's the same kind of.
But at the same time, I think what people miss about Carpenter, and it's funny because I view Carpenter in ways as very similar to my favorite filmmaker, my inspiration, the reason I went to film school. He's very similar to me to Abel Ferrara.
Quite the lead up. Okay.
I wanted to pause for a second. I had a brain fart, but he reminds me a lot of Abel Ferrara, and a lot of people have pointed out that Ferrara, who did King of New York, Bad Lieutenant, is really a collaborative filmmaker. He sort of gives his actors and the people.
Yeah, he's like a David Bowie type.
He's like, what can you give to me, Keitel? What do you want to do with this role? He doesn't say like, this is what you have to do. And I mean, on some level, I think all filmmakers kind of have a dictatorial streak in some ways, but I think people like Carpenter and Ferrara understand that film is a collaborative process, because based on what I've read about Carpenter, he would give leeway to actors like Donald Pleasance. Like, how do you want to do this, Donald? And that's what I find inspiring about Carpenter, is he understands that film is really a collaborative process. Like, he brings his vision to it, but he also understands that the other players can bring their own vision to it as well.
I'd argue that there are some films that are too much of a collaborative process. Like, you have a lot more watered down. I mean, even like the MCU, like, it's never one person kind of making a decision. It's like a room full of people being like, yeah, but is this really going to play?
The studio. I'm talking about like.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, but in general, like, it feels like he is one of those directors. I mean, there's a famous Francis Ford Coppola thing in Heart of Darkness, like the documentary about making Apocalypse Now, where he says, he felt like filmmaking was the last, or being a director was the last kind of dictatorial role, like in a democratized society. Film direct, which I don't agree with, in terms of the rest of society, because there's tons of dictatorial roles, but he felt like in a democratized society, film directing is the last dictatorial role that somebody could have. He's like, the film director is the last dictator. So, looking at kind of this new Hollywood system of filmmaking, which is what, John Carpenter's operating out of as well. Like, it's you can see either you kind of see yourself as a dictator, see yourself as someone kind of in charge of everything, or you see yourself as a collaborative partner. And it felt like even in Halloween, he had Deborah Hill, his wife at the time, as
the unsung Deborah
partner.
Hill, right?
Yeah,
we talked about at length on that episode.
He had Deborah Hill as a collaborative partner, like, on top of having the rest of the cast. Like, it kind of feels like he sees himself in a very different way than a lot of like Scorsese, or
he doesn't come out of the Hollywood brat pack. In
yeah.
other words, like this Spielberg, Schrader, all those guys, he's kind of in his own category.
He's kind of in the smoke weed and hang out category. Anyway, tying it full well to Letterboxd one-liners, Conan Neutron, the man with
definitely put the sunglasses on for this. Yeah. Absolutely. So, as everybody now knows, avid fans of the show will notice and remember.
Real heads will know.
Real heads will know that Letterboxd is a place for films, a social media site for lovers of cinema, movies, film, etc., to track, rate, review, and discuss movies of different kinds. It's a great service. It's a service that this show was on, Movie Night Extravaganza, which is ostensibly just Forrest. Myself, Conan Neutron.
I don't like that you do that, because it makes me feel like you're just throwing me in case I have a bad take, it makes me feel like you're just throwing me to the wolves. But yeah.
Look, I need to insulate myself in case you say like a word that Twitter doesn't like or something, right? Conan Neutron, myself, I'm probably the most heavy user of the bunch of us. Poor little out for our homie J. Andrew World.
Yeah, you fucking Letterboxd addict.
Right. Matthew Film Guy, lots of us are in Letterboxd. It's a place to not just track what you want to see, but what you have seen. One of the nice things about it being a bottom-up democracy is you get all the stuff from the hoi polloi. It's not just like your modern-day Suskulls and Eberts. This is everybody gets the chance to weigh in. One of the nicer things about it is also people have a tendency to take what they've learned from social media and give terse renderings, sometimes very funny, as one-liners for different reviews of the movies that they like, watch, show, or touch.
By the way, I have to point out, my friend pointed this out to me in They Live, the guy at the end of it that's like, oh well, I don't really like all this sex and violence, is a parody of Siskel and Ebert. It's
100%. Siskel specifically. Yeah, like which is very real, very real. Right?
That reminds me of the scene in Gremlins 2 where they kill Leonard Maltin for giving a bad review to Gremlins.
which is an astounding story in and of itself, but it's not the intro to this bit, which is the letterbox one-liners for They Live. Let's go, Forrest. Roddy Piper and Keith David fight in the alley for like 45 minutes. Where's the lie? That's 9-volt. Rowdy puts his sunglasses on, sees the world for what it is, takes them off, and says, "It figures," which is a deeply fucked response, but it feels real. It feels earned. I felt that.
I have to point this out though. He says it figures when it's Reagan on TV that's giving his Morning in America speech.
Morning in America. Yeah, specifically.
Which is fucking amazing.
Yeah. It's there's there ambiguity at all. There's not. Ham-fisted, you fucking bet, baby. 4 exclamation points. Subtlety is simply for chumps when we're talking about revealing what we already know but can't articulate. Also, Roddy Piper gets thrown out of a window and a garbage truck. What the hell else could you want from a movie, you sick freak? 5 question marks.
It's 100% true. Like there's a lot about the society we live in that's that but can't articulate. And the fact that these glasses kind of make that apparent is like, whether it's ham-fisted or not. Like I think this is an amazing review.
I yes, that's why I picked it. Every time I watch this movie, the fight gets 5 minutes longer. That's Patrick Klepak for that. I don't know why nobody wants to put on the sunglasses. I fucking love putting on sunglasses. I am with you.
Conan, did you write this one?
I know, that's my alias. That's my what do they call it? Sock puppet account, right? My centrist friend asked, why doesn't he just put on the glasses during the fight scene? Like I haven't been trying to make him wear them for years. That's Lagger. I thought that one would take me first.
No, that one's amazing.
It's real. Roddy Piper's character is a real one. Discovers a secret ruling class of aliens, and he just instantly brings a shotgun into a bank and starts killing them. Sorry, I was laughing too hard on that one. They live, they laugh, they love.
Have you ever seen The Shining? There's a Shining meme, and the kid from The Shining, he's writing "Live, Laugh, Love" on the.
That's astounding. I love it. The alley fight is the most accurate description of an online argument I have ever seen. That one, I probably lost my shit at that one for at least a few minutes because, this is potentially my favorite Mullen movie. Potentially. We'll see. We'll see how it works out.
Well, there's a lot of Mullen movies in the 80s.
There are. Anyway, these are the letterbox one-liners.
And we're gonna fully, go through that rabbit hole next month.
Apparently, we will. Yes. These are the letterbox one-liners. Letterbox is a place for film. Follow Movie Night Extravaganza on Letterboxd. Follow myself, Conan Neutron, J. Andrew World, all of the lovely guests and co-hosts and just hangers-on of this show, because you are all geniuses and beautiful, and we love you.
Conan's time to really show appreciation for the people on Letterboxd.
It's great. I legitimately like being on that site, which is more I can say for literally any other social media.
Yeah, my
take of that what you will. Maybe that's a Conan problem.
My Letterboxd review of this movie was all right. Well, I wouldn't need to have sunglasses on to explain to you why Reaganism was bullshit, but I'm glad people are waking up. That was my version of it.
And I to be fair, anybody on the show does not preemptively, no matter how great it is, doesn't get included into this bit.
No, I know.
But that was good. And there's been other ones.
I heard it all.
I was like, that would have been included. I also I threw in, because I actually never review They Live on Letterboxd as much as I've seen it, like, at least a dozen times. But I said, I'm giving you a choice: either watch this movie or start eating that trash can.
Yeah,
I felt pretty good about that, because I don't normally do one-liners, right?
I have been eating from that trash can the whole time.
I should have kept my name as what it was.
Is called ideology.
So good. So, but like, but that's the thing. Like, I mean, I'm not a one-liner dude on Letterboxd, but I enjoy the form, right? So, like,
I've been getting
I
more
like
in
this.
that. I've been getting more in that mold because I just think a lot of movies, I'm like, well, I'm going to talk about them on here. Like, I review movies that I'm going to talk about on here, so I'm like, a one-liner isn't bad because I'll give.
Yeah, it doesn't take that much effort. You're not sitting there writing like a freaking essay, question, answer to something, right? It's great.
I do not write the answered question to nothing. Anyway, we're going to go to final thoughts. Let me hear from JG Michael from the, esteemed Parallax Views podcast about your final thoughts on this film.
Okay, well, first off, I just want to say I love the Letterboxd one-liners segment now. I don't think it gets praised enough. So, final thoughts, though. I love the dancing, too. But final thoughts, I would rank They Live very highly within my favorite Carpenter films. And I think it's an interesting film because it's funny. I think people say, oh, it's ham-fisted or, it's not subtle. But, I think what makes genre films great, and I know Eileen Jones talked about this and others, but, genre films can communicate things to a wide audience. And, in a way, I like that They Live maybe takes a quote-unquote ham-fisted approach because, it's a movie that's trying to communicate ideas. It's not trying to obfuscate or drown itself in ambiguity. Carpenter has a message he wants to send you while also entertaining you. And I think if that's what the film set out to do, which it is, I would say it's a 2 thumbs up film. So I think it's one of Carpenter's biggest achievements, right up there with Escape from New York and just any other endless number of films he's done over the years. Oddly enough, I think I would rank this more highly than I love Halloween, but I like They Live and Escape from New York and Prince of Darkness probably the most, and The Thing. Those are like my top 4, and then maybe Halloween. So They Live is definitely up there for me.
Nice. All right. Conan, what do you see with those glasses? Tell us your final thoughts.
The sunglasses are down, everybody. So first of all, I love ham. And I think that is, is it ham-fisted? Sure. But I agree with all of the points that JG Michael made. I think that this is so devastatingly effective that it's not just sparking discussion, but really rowdy, active discussions. How many years later? That's amazing. And it's amazing the fact that, like, if you take all that away, if you take a young man that just likes sci-fi crap, right? And you're sitting there, like, being impatient for the first, 35 minutes or whatever, it's still a great movie. Like, this movie works. And it stars Rowdy Roddy Piper, noted thespian Rowdy Roddy Piper, right? Amazing. And he's great in it. Freaking Keith David's awesome in it. And his, like, purple tank top. Fantastic. Everyone is like awesome at it, and this is
Meg
one of
Foster.
Meg, exactly. Let's not.
The eyes. I always call her the eyes.
She is the eyes. Yes. The thing with this movie that works so well is that it takes something that's ultimately a 50s sci-fi concept and places it firmly in what was the zeitgeist of the 80s in a way that was not being questioned or discussed before, but did in such a way that's still poignant. Still makes sense, still works all these years later, which in a way says more to the discredit of our society than anything else. But here's the point of fact. This is still a very deeply entertaining movie. Like, every one of the one-liners that they have in the movie are like, just like, what? Like, where did you come up with that from? fantastic, but it works. And so it works on the level you can appreciate it, where you like shout it to your friends when something funny happens or whatever. It works in the way of like deep political commentary, where you have, Zizek still eating that trash can. It works in the level of the fact that, like, what a bummer.
I have this feeling that Zizek would have been eating from that trash can, whether or not it was ideology. But, I mean.
It works in the level of, like, what a fantastic bummer ending of all time, capped with a completely gratuitous person having sex with an alien scene. Amazing. Amazing. There's no reason
literally just putting it at the end of the movie.
Just putting it at the end. Like just to remind the viewer that they're watching, they're watching the film, and to think about the
and also reminding people that porn is still kind of a media creation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and the last point I have to make for it is that, like, ultimately there would not be a thing like Adbusters without something like They Live. Take of that what you will, because Adbusters ultimately failed, other than to spark the idea behind the Occupy movement. But there has been real societal and political change that has happened because of They Live. Has it unspooled the same problems from, the year that it was made? No, absolutely not. But we're still asking the questions, and it makes it all the more annoying when all these Q idiots tried to come on the facile elements of it and make it seem less, because this is a fantastic film. Every time I see it, I actually like it a little more.
Yeah. All right. My father, I have come to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
I'm science fiction man.